Blog Talk Radio.
Carol the Coach. Sex, love, and relationships. We talk about it here.
Carol the Coach. Compassion with contemporary relevance.
I am a psychotherapist. I can be your personal life coach, and I can help you with your issues. There are no problems too small or too big. You can talk about anything.
Speaker, columnist, radio TV host, and commentator. Carol the Coach brings messages of wellness and empowerment within reach of everyday people every day.
Almost 5 years ago, I lost my soulmate in an accident. He was killed in a plane crash. Life just, for me, has seemed to stop.
There are groups all over the city. I teach one. It is a specific way to start thinking so that you shift how you see the world, which then shifts your energy, and then you feel better and you actually see things differently.
Carol the Coach. Always available too at carolthecoach.com.
Now I've got Russell on the line.
I'm 47 years old. I'm a truck driver. I am married. I have a wife in San Francisco.
Okay.
I haven't been home in 6 months. My thing is, I don't know if I have a sex addiction or what the problem is. Why do I want what I can't have? And as soon as I can have it, I don't want it anymore.
You're right on target when you say, I don't know if I have a sexual addiction. Well, guess what? Yes, you do. And you know what? That's my specialty, Russell, so you're at the right place. Continue.
I meet women online, and I'm in a different part of the country. I travel all 48 states, so I love sex.
I hear self-esteem issues. You never felt good enough, and you didn't feel like you were getting what you should have then, and you're reenacting that now. Do you want to change that about yourself?
You get what you need.
I got an interesting
email from a man who said that he was having a lot of difficulty with his wife. She wasn't trusting him, and he was on the straight and narrow. He was really working hard in his 12-step program to be honest and authentic and transparent. And she still didn't believe him. And he asked me, what should he do? And I got to tell you, what I told him was that he needed to empathize with his partner, his spouse. He needed to reassure her, and he needed to just keep doing the next right thing. You know, if she had contacted me, I would have suggested that maybe she go to COSA, or maybe she go to S-Anon, or maybe she get a recovery coach. I would have also encouraged her to read some books on partner trauma, because it takes a long time for a partner to trust that the addict is really participating in a healthy recovery program. And, you know, if there's one thing that my addicts that are in good recovery say to me, is they say, Carol, it gets frustrating when we do this for 1 to 2 years, and our spouses, our wives, or our husbands don't believe us. They still get triggered. They still act like we're lying. And, you know, even tonight in group, one of the guys said, you know, we spent our entire relationship lying to our wives. And we expect them to trust us in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, 18 months. We got to remember to be patient with them, because we spent all those years lying. And now that we're clean, we are in recovery, we are working on being authentic, transparent, and honest. They have to see over and over and over again. Only time can reassure them and our behaviors. So I guess the moral of the story is that it is absolutely imperative, if you're a sex addict in good recovery, not to give up on your wife. You know, this is the collateral damage, and you've just got to hang in there with her, and you've got to be patient. And, you know, I talked to a couple this weekend, and it was really, it was a sad situation, but I thought it was a predictable situation. They were coming in for therapy, and she texted me and said, Carol, I am not coming. He doesn't want me there. And I said, oh, Cindy, I want you there. And she sent me back a text and said, well, I don't care because he doesn't want me there. And then he texted me and said, my wife isn't coming. She called me a blankety blank blank blank. She doesn't trust me. She says she's through with me. She said she wants a divorce. And I just said, I'm going to go see Carol by myself. Now you can see from each of their wounded souls that they were hurt, that the other person was not really attending to their wounds. So I got to tell you, here's what happened. He came in, and I actually saw him walking up to the door. I let them in on the weekends because the door's locked. And he came in by himself, and I said, oh, Cindy didn't come with you? And he said, she's out in the car. She just cussed me out and told me there was no way in hell she was coming in. And I said, well, Joe, do you mind if I invite her anyway? And he said, no, I don't give a blankety blank. Well, you know what I really translated that to mean? Now, I don't know if you would have translated this, but this is how I translated it. Yes, Carol, will you please try to get her to come in because I don't want her to be mad at me. So then I actually waved her in, and no doors opened. And so I called her, and I said, Cindy, will you please come in? He doesn't want me in there, and I'm just going to sit out in the cold. And it really was. It was about 25 degrees. And I said, well, A, I want you to come sit in our waiting room. But more importantly, I want you to come in even if just for 10 minutes so that we can talk a little bit about why you're hurt, so I can help him to understand. And maybe we can even understand why he's hurt. Well, this is a couple that loves each other. This is a couple who wants to make it work. But they had spiraled down into this, experience where they were defending themselves to such a degree as they were shutting the other person out, and then the other person was feeling wounded and not feeling loved, and then they didn't want to be a part of it. And, deep down inside, when an addict has acted out, the spouse really has the upper hand / lower hand. I mean, he or she's the one that's been hurt the most, and so ultimately they have less inclination to want to make it work because they have less feeling that it will work. Well, I had them both come in. They didn't talk to me all the way down this long hall. I actually am in the furthest part of the building. It was tense. But I got them in there, and we started talking about, wow, if you could do it differently, if you could change the whole situation, what would be different? And he said, you know what? She got mad at me because I fell asleep during a movie last night, and she started cussing me out, and she just put me down. And she said, understandably, you know what? I'm thinking to myself, oh, you fall asleep with me, but I bet you didn't fall asleep with her. And she starts feeling less than. Well, he didn't know that she had that trigger and that she wasn't just reacting to the fact that he falls asleep. She was reacting to the fact that she didn't feel like she was captivating enough or exciting enough to keep him interested. And that triggered her into all sorts of anxiety. So she gets mad at him, and then he gets mad at her because she's overreacting to him. And he's thinking, I didn't do anything. And as you can imagine, the relationship went south. Now, how many times in your relationship has something like that happened? If you're single and you don't have a partner, this is one of the collateral damages of being with somebody is that you hurt them. And here's what I know about my single men and women. They would kill to have this kind of relationship as opposed to no relationship at all. It sounds horrible, but when you're by yourself and alone, that loneliness is absolutely smothering. And, I have so many single guys that say, I wish I had somebody in my life that helped to keep me on the straight and narrow. I need that. I wish I had somebody that I had to worry about, that extra incentive to do the right thing. If you're single and you're sitting here listening to this show, I get it. I get that it may feel like you're all alone, and here's what I want you to know. It's not the same thing as a partner, but you have to reach out to people in the fellowship, and you have to have people that care about you. That is going to be your job as a single man or woman. And then if you're in a coupleship, you have to get somebody who is an expert in the field of sexual addiction or partner trauma. If you get somebody who's an expert in that field, they will understand where the pain's coming from. They'll understand that ultimately you don't want to be fighting with your partner. And they'll understand that triggers occur for either one of you that come out of nowhere. Or they may have just been ignited by the simplest of things. Hi, I'm Carol the coach, and I want you to know that I'm here to help you with your sex addiction and your partner trauma, with your coupleship or with your recovery program. And I interview experts all over the world. I've got Richard Blankenship on tonight, and he's going to be talking about relational trauma and the importance of disclosures. Why do we do the formalized process of disclosures? Because I got to tell you, they're exhausting for the partner, for the addict, and even for the therapist. They are time-consuming. They can take 1, 2, or 3 days of intensive work, or they can take 4, 5, or 6 sessions. But really, they are insurance that you are hearing for the first time every conceivable situation that might have come up in your partner's past, in your addict's past. And I'm not saying that we always get every single thing out, but we get most of it out. And, if there's one thing I know about spouses is that they say, I can't keep taking the information that I either pry out of him or her, or that ekes out because all of a sudden they have a sense of conscience, or I investigate and find out about. And as a result, it's that opportunity to come clean and come clean fully. It's a whole process, and it really makes a big difference. And the disclosure process is a situation that you really should be formally trained. It's not something that a therapist should just try willy-nilly, because there is a whole structure to the disclosure. And when it's done properly, it ensures that everybody has gotten the right information and that there are safeguards to making sure that at least your partner, well, I should say the addict, has gotten every bit of information out that he or she's aware of. Because at the end of the disclosure, there's oftentimes a polygraph test, so that it ensures the partner that he or she was not withholding anything else. And Richard and I are going to be talking about that and how that reduces some of that relational trauma. He works at Capstone Center. He's going to talk to you about his position, why he got into the business, what he's found to be the most helpful. And he and I are on the same board together, and I have to tell you, he does amazing work with couples at Capstone Center, which is out of Atlanta, Georgia. So, Richard, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Carol.
Absolutely. I mean, you have devoted so much of your life to this work. And I want to ask you, how in the world did you get involved with relational trauma and sex addiction?
Well, it started when I was just working in private practice as a counselor, and the problems kept walking through the door. And I went and got specialty training in how to address it, and just absolutely fell in love with the people and the process. And at the time, I had no idea it was going to become the focus of my life work, but I can tell you it's been one of the most rewarding areas to work in of any part of the counseling industry.
Yeah, and tell us a little bit about Capstone Center. What do they do there, and is it solely for sexual addiction, or do you treat other types of situations?
We do just about everything here. It's the Capstone Center for Counseling, DBT, and Relational Trauma is based in Atlanta, Georgia. We've got 5 offices in the metro Atlanta area, and we have some specialty areas, but we also have people who will just treat depression, anxiety, general marriage, counseling, relationship issues. The 2 specialties we're the most widely known for are DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, and, of course, sexual addiction. We had the first program in Atlanta to ever offer the full range of groups for both the male addict, female addict, partners of addicts, couples in recovery, as well as children who were being impacted by sexual acting out. And through the years, that program has grown to where we have as many as 6 men's groups here every week, typically 2 or 3 partner groups, and a variety of services for couples and for families. And the more we saw, the more we experienced the depth of betrayal trauma. It just became more and more clear that we really needed to look at this as a relational trauma and to try to come up with as many resources for relational healing as we possibly could.
Okay, now define for us, what is relational trauma?
Relational trauma is an injury that is inflicted by one partner, one intimate partner upon another, typically in a committed relationship, a marriage relationship, or something like that, to the point that a person relies on and trusts in that relationship so much that to be betrayed in that relationship is extremely devastating. There's very few relationships where you end up having to try to heal in the same relationship where you got hurt. And what ends up happening is once the betrayal trauma hits, the whole relationship gets defined as a source of terror.
Yeah, and that terror can manifest itself in panic attacks and anxiety, both generalized and specific. And so you are one of the first centers that really worked on this relational trauma. And one of the things I love about your centers is that they are so comprehensive. Like you said, you treat the addict, you treat the partner, you treat the couple shit, you even treat the kids.
Yes, we found that that's an area that's not being addressed too much, but the relational trauma does extend on down to the children, and historically the treatment models have just simply forgotten about the kids and neglected them. But I'm really proud of a play therapist that we have here at the center. Her name's Amanda Dance, and she is doing some great work with us, working with the children of addicts, doing some play therapy with the younger ones, and we're trying to learn as much as we can from those children, and to find out what it's like to grow up in the home of an addict in recovery.
Well, I bet, and the old adage about you're only as sick as your secrets, and clearly, with any kind of addiction, there is that don't trust, don't talk, and don't feel attitude. And so for kids, it's really important for them to be able to talk about what's going on in their life and to be validated for that.
Mm-hmm.
So let me ask
well, and that's very true. There is a need to be validated, yet the kids and even the partners in many cases, they can sense that there's something wrong. They know there's something wrong in the family. They don't know the specifics, and especially in the case of children, they may not even have a vocabulary with which to articulate it. And so, children will often do that through play. And we have found that some of their anxieties and some of their concerns actually can be discovered through art therapy and a variety of other activities. And once we give voice to that, it really brings those secrets out of the closet, so to speak, and brings them into a therapeutic environment where we can do some work around them and facilitate a healing process.
Well, and very clearly.
But you're absolutely right. That whole 12-step wisdom saying, as I call it, you're only as sick as your secrets, is very true.
So let's talk a little bit about the disclosure process, because for a lot of people listening, they may not have ever heard about a disclosure. And so how would you define a formal disclosure, and why do you believe that is such an important process for addicts and partners alike?
It is critical for both addict and partner recovery and healing. I like to use the phrase recovery and transformation. One is you're only as sick as your secrets, and as long as there are a bunch of secrets, you can't really have healing. You also don't develop true intimacy in a relationship. And so being able to facilitate the telling of those secrets in as therapeutic of a manner as possible is a big part of that. Ultimately, I believe the purpose of disclosure is the rebuilding of intimacy, because intimacy, in order to have it, you have to have honesty. I was just talking with a partner earlier today, and one of the things that we were talking about was how the addict just wants her to get over it and move on. And her response back to me was, well, how am I going to be able to move on if I don't even know what you've done and what I'm moving on from? And so another critical piece of it is just getting the facts out, getting the information to the partner. And what I find with so many partners is their fears and their imagination are typically worse than the truth. Now, that's not always the case, but in a number of them it is. And so the disclosure process actually can bring some relief to the partner. For the addict, it just helps facilitate their healing even more and their recovery. They need to not be keeping secrets, and as long as they're trying to hide things, that's the kind of thing that's going to continue to just add fuel to the engine of their addiction.
Yeah, absolutely. So even though this is a very painful process, or can be, for both the addict who knows that they're going to be disclosing secrets and things that they've kept inside, more often than not, either because they were afraid they were going to hurt their partner, or because they were afraid that this might be the last thing that actually breaks the camel's back and that the partner may leave. Now, I look at things from the addict's point of view and the partner's, and certainly for the partner, it is so painful to hear the many, many things that have occurred in the addict's life, because this disclosure process really goes from start to finish. Isn't that correct?
That's correct. And one of the things I hear continuously from partners, I've heard it a couple of times today, is, we can actually deal with the sexual part of things. It's the lies, the deceit, and the secrets that are so much more devastating and so much more re-traumatizing to them. Once they get the facts, what I find is most partners can actually heal, they can grieve, they can work through those things. But if they don't know what it is that they're dealing with, they end up stuck and often just obsessing about fears rather than being able to cope with the truth. And certainly it is a terrifying thing for the addict as well. And as you said, Carol, their top fear is typically that the partner will leave them. And what we know from research is that rarely is true. The overwhelming majority of the couples make it, and according to Jennifer Snyder and Deb Corley's research, I believe it's 93% of partners in retrospect are glad that they went through the process. And what I later find, even with working with addicts, is once they get through the process, they're actually glad that they don't have to keep the secrets. You put a lot of energy into living a double life, and it's very draining. And so the addicts find that they get a lot of relief from not having to carry those secrets anymore.
Well, absolutely. And like you said earlier, for the partners, oftentimes their fears are even worse than the information that they gain from the disclosure. And for both people in the coupleship, once the secrets are out and everybody understands, and a polygraph test is typically given just to substantiate that everything was told, they can begin to heal from that wounding and form the trust that they need. And, you know, for some of these couples, as silly as it sounds or as unusual as it sounds, they've never really had an intimate relationship. You know, we say sexual addiction is an intimacy disorder, and it is, but a lot of times the addict faked out the partner, and the partner thought there was intimacy when there really wasn't, and then the addiction occurred, and that kept it even more unintimate. So this is really an opportunity, the disclosure is, to help couples get through the process and then begin to build true intimacy. Of course, that has to be guided by a specialist, somebody who understands this field.
Absolutely. And, yeah, I've trained a number of therapists in how to do disclosures. I don't believe people who aren't therapists should be facilitating these things. There are just so many things that can go wrong. There's the potential for so many reactions. It's even under ideal circumstances, disclosure sessions are very traumatic, and they're very difficult. I'd liken them to surgery, where you're going to be cutting out an infection. The process is painful, but it's really what's necessary in so many cases to lead to the healing of that wound. And it does create an opportunity for real intimacy, because so many addicts have had it sexualized that they have never really experienced this. And you've typically got a partner who is craving that intimate connection and is, in so many cases, is even willing to give the addict another opportunity to build that. One of the things that has amazed me through the years of working with couples is how many of their marriages not only make it, but how many of them really thrive. In fact, I would maintain that the average married couple in America will never attain the level of intimacy that a couple in recovery gets to, just because of the depth of work and pain that they have to go through to get there. Now, I'm still not going to recommend a sex addiction as a way to a better marriage relationship, but what I think it does say is for couples that go through this process, there's a lot of hope. And when I think about the disclosures I've done with people through the years, one of the things I find is it really becomes kind of a landmark in that journey for the couple. It's a mile marker, so to speak, because from that day on, they will refer to so many things as post-disclosure. And it's amazing to me, what kinds of things they accomplish after that disclosure has taken place.
Well, I, because I'm not in a situation where I offer intensives, I oftentimes spend anywhere from 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 sessions with the addict and 2, 3, 4 sessions with the spouse to compile the information necessary for the disclosure. And it can be a lengthy process. And one of the things, Richard, I've done is I have referred specifically to you, because for partners that don't want to spend a month or 2 in this process, they can actually go through an intensive process where they spend 1, 2, or 3 days with you going through all of this stuff and getting it out and done with over a long weekend. And that seems to have been really a successful treatment process for my clients that I've referred to you. Can you tell our listening audience a little bit about the structure that Capstone offers to our clients?
I'd love to. Yes, I facilitate a lot of disclosures here in Atlanta along with my partner, Dr. Janice Stevens. Janice is also an APSATS-trained therapist, and she will often prepare the partner while I'm preparing the addict, sometimes vice versa. And we usually start that process with a phone session or two before they actually come to Atlanta. And we do some preparation work in advance. And then once the couple gets here, we get the process going. And it's typically going to involve a session where that statement that the addict has compiled is going to be read in a session in the presence of both therapists and the partner. And we will have done a lot of things to prepare the partner as well. We want to get her questions. We want to know what she wants to know. We are trying to get to know her to figure out what's the safest way to facilitate things, and we want to create as much safety for her as we possibly can. And that's not always easy when they're coming to a strange town, but nonetheless we've been able to do that successfully through the years. So we will go through that. Now, sometimes we will do the polygraph before the disclosure sessions. Other times we do it afterwards. I try to do them before as much as I can. Sometimes it just comes down to scheduling and logistics. But if we do that, I like to be able to go into that session and be able to say to the partner, he's ready to read his disclosure to you, and we have a past polygraph. And the polygrapher will even take into account the partner's questions, informing the questions that go into that polygraph. So we go through a good bit of that, and then after that process is over and we've got a past polygraph, then we begin to work on the aftercare plans for when they go home, and hopefully we will have wonderful therapists like we do with you in Indianapolis who can then continue their care. So we try to resource them, get them as many resources as possible so that they can continue that journey once they get home.
Absolutely, and that is what is so important, is that they get support before they come in for the disclosure, support during, and then obviously ongoing support afterwards. And again, for our listening audience, if you don't have a specialist in your town that can treat sex addiction or partner relationship trauma, you can go to the APSATS website, which is APSATS. You can go to the Sex Help website for sexual addiction. And, Richard, you have a specialized sex addiction and relational trauma website. Can you give our listening audience your website?
Well, the two that I would also add to your list would be the APSATS website, the Association for Partners of Sex Addicts Trauma Specialists, and that's apsats.org. And then for people who would like to do work perhaps with a faith-based clinician, we have the International Association of Certified Sex Addiction Specialists, and that website is sexaddictioncertification.org. And so there are a number of therapists in both of those organizations who have been through some specialty training with us in how to facilitate a disclosure. One of the things I would emphasize, though, is not all sex addiction specialists opt to do disclosure. Or do the disclosure process, and because it is so complex, it's very, very intense, and it requires so much preparation. There's a lot of really good sex addiction therapists out there who just simply are not comfortable doing this, and that's okay. That's why we have some folks who can do some of these intensives, and that's why a number of people around the country opt to come to Atlanta and go through this process with us.
Right, and so again, if they wanted to work with you directly, how could they get a hold of you?
They can contact us through our website, which is capstoneatlanta.com. My email is richard@capstoneatlanta.com, and we'd be glad to share with, get information to anybody who's interested in that process.
Yeah, and we have a dear friend, Milton Magnus, who also, Dr. Milton Magnus, does these intensives. And actually, either you or I could refer people to an area that's close to home, although I have had several people who have said, no, I don't mind going 2 or 3 states away because it's something that I want to participate in, and I don't want it to be in my backyard. I don't want to be reminded. I want to do this work, and I don't want to have to every single day.
Yeah, we have had people come to Atlanta from several from the New England area, literally coast to coast. We've had people from the Northwest who have come in, get a lot of people from the Midwest as well. And you're right, they would prefer not to necessarily do it in their backyard. But if you are in the Houston area, Milton Magnus does an outstanding job with disclosure intensives, and I would highly recommend his work as well.
Yeah, so now can you tell me, obviously you have made it your mission to work with sex addicts and relational trauma, and what we know about partners who love a sex addict is that oftentimes they are very, very triggered by anything that they actually associate with, unconsciously, subconsciously, or consciously, with their addict's behavior or experience. What do you do specifically for partners to decrease that anxiety, reduce that post-traumatic stress, or even that complex post-traumatic stress?
Oh, there's so many steps that we take with partners, and you're absolutely right. It's very traumatic, and the relational trauma, by definition, means you're in a relationship where you're going to be triggered. You're trying to heal with the very person who hurt you, and that is traumatic in and of itself. Yet I also have to say there's a lot of hope for it, and we see a lot of couples navigate that journey successfully. Some of the things in terms of just helping the partner get through it, we obviously want to start with validating her experience and her feelings. As I've shared with partners in sessions today, I always say you're not crazy. You have not lost touch with reality, and you are not going to be, you're not responsible for his choices. And they need to hear that over and over. And, they need a lot of reassurance along those lines. For some who will get into, like, the complex post-traumatic stress thing, sometimes that does require more intense trauma treatment, and we've used some techniques like EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing. We do some body work and some somatoform experiencing based on a lot of Peter Levine's work. And so we have a variety of things like that we use to help partners cope with that. But they're living in a very triggering environment. And the analogy that I often use with them, if you compare being the partner of a sex addict to being a victim of a rape, when you go through a rape by a stranger, the odds are high you will never see the perpetrator again outside of a courtroom, or at least we hope not. But in the case of betrayal trauma, you're seeing your perpetrator, so to speak, every single day. You're living in the same house with them. You're often sleeping in the same bed with them. And so it's only natural that you're going to experience a lot of anxiety, a lot of trauma reactions, and partners are going to suffer greatly through that process because so many things in the environment become triggering. And then when you start to consider all of the cultural triggers that exist, everywhere they turn, there's a billboard that's sexually explicit, TV commercials, television shows, jokes that are being cracked in mainstream media about it. You've got news stories that are coming out about sex addiction and either, minimizing it or cracking jokes about it. And so a partner is experiencing all of that, and it's just like she's being flooded with all kinds. It's almost like it's hard to find a safe place where you aren't being hit with something. And then, you try to go home, and from there, even the home environment is triggering.
Yeah, I had a couple, and they have 2 small children, and they had not had any time by themselves for over a year. And Grandma came into town and took the kids to a hotel. And so they decided just to hang out and try to develop a little intimacy. And prior to that, a movie had been recommended to the partner, and it was Bad Moms. And they started watching it. She had heard it was a comedy. She was really excited. And lo and behold, one of the people in the movie had a husband who actually had a sexual addiction and was very, very unfaithful. And it just took both of them down. You know, she was absolutely triggered and traumatized and thinking, oh, my God, this just ruined our entire night. And then he was traumatized and triggered because he hated to watch his wife go through that trauma, and he knew the minute that this started to play that this was going to absolutely devastate her. And so you had this couple that was really looking forward to a good night, their very first night without the kids in over a year, and just the scene in a movie set them spiraling down the wrong path, and it was painful for both of them. So you're exactly right. This is something that, you know, can just come out of the blue, and especially when you're trying to work through your own trauma and you live with that person, or maybe he's living in a hotel, maybe he's living with his brother, maybe he's got an apartment. It matters not, because if you're sharing kids or you're checking in with each other daily, every other day, you're still being reminded. But I am so glad that you pointed out that couples that stay together and work through this are actually happier and healthier than all the other couples out there that didn't experience the sexual addiction. I mean, recovery makes people better. So, you know, for
it
any
sure
of our
does, and it just amazes me how people who have been through some of these traumas, just to see them come through and to come out on the other side, not only surviving and in good shape, but in some cases they thrive. And I had a couple just recently. It was about a 30-year marriage, and they came back to tell me that, you know, we had no idea we would survive, and now life is better than it's ever been. Our marriage is better than we ever dreamed it would be. And, you know, this was, you know, a recovery from, I believe, 17 affairs. And so, yeah, there was a lot of stuff they had to go through, a lot of grieving, a lot of trauma for both of them. But to get a letter from them just recently saying it's better than ever was just absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons we're in this business. I always say it's the darkest of the dark, because, you know, whenever you're dealing with betrayal, that is a difficult and devastating experience. And even as therapists, you know, I remember Patrick Carnes said that we're more prone to illness, we're more prone to heart attacks, we're more prone to all sorts of physical and medical maladies unless we keep ourselves healthy and safe. And when I think about the letters that we do get, you know, and I've got a lot of listeners that keep me posted. You know, Richard, I don't know if I shared with you, but I had a woman who started listening to my podcasts as a partner, and she said, I would listen to you every single day as I ran. And she said, after about a year and a half, I decided I wanted to go back to be a counselor. And she had started that process but never finished, so she finished it. And then she said, after 2 years of being certified in terms of being clinically certified, she said, I decided I wanted to go back and become a CSAT. And then she said, now I'm really excited because I want to be an APSAT certified therapist. So in a period of 4 years, she has gone from running and listening to podcasts to listening to the show and finishing her degree, and then getting her 2 years basic supervision from another clinical specialist, and then she went into the CSAP program, and she's in the process of finishing that up. And she says, as soon as I get this degree, certification, I am going back in to become an APSAT certified counselor. So those are the kinds of times that we really smile and we say we're making a difference, and we're watching people blossom and thrive as opposed to survive.
It just continues to amaze me. But I tell people when they come in, especially an addict, if you're going to have a problem, let's have a problem we can do something about. And the good news here is this is a problem we can do something about. And there's a lot of hope for people who choose to take this journey. The relational, we talk about going from relational trauma to relational thriving, and that's not an easy process, but it's one that's very healing and very rewarding, and it's exciting to work with that. You're right in terms of what you're sharing about therapists, and we do bear an awful lot of the trauma and the wounds that our clients bring us. We often call it vicarious trauma. And that's one of the reasons that we have some pretty strict guidelines for therapists around facilitating disclosures. That's one of the most traumatic things we're ever exposed to, and there's a lot of things that we recommend to therapists in order to manage those sessions to not only be able to provide the top level of care for the client, but for the therapist to take care of themselves. It is really easy to end up developing a lot of health problems if you don't know how to process your role as a therapist and the impact that being exposed to so much of people's dark sides has on you. And it does impact us in ways that we often don't imagine.
Absolutely. And, you have spent the majority of, the last 15 years, 20 years working in this field?
Yeah, longer than I can count. It's definitely in the over 20. I think now it's somewhere between 20 and 25.
And tell us about the book that you wrote, because that's kind of a standard Bible in terms of sexual addiction. Tell us a little bit about that.
I don't know if I would call it a standard Bible, but thanks for the compliment. One of the books that I wrote is called Spouses of Sex Addicts, Hope for the Journey. And I had actually 4 contributing writers to it, so it wasn't just me, and had a number of partners who shared their stories for it, and had a number of therapists who reviewed it. It was, I believe, the first book to ever be released that made the conscious effort that made the decision we would not use terms like co-addict or codependency in the book. And then, of course, the book that so many at APSATS are familiar with, Barbara Steffen's book, Your Sexually Addicted Spouse, really brought the model out. And, we've been very excited about the impact of both of those books. In addition to the book itself, about 2 years ago, one of our APSATS-trained clinicians, Françoise Mastrani, she co-authored a workbook with me in which she integrated the body work, the somatoform experiencing, using her training from Peter Levine, and integrated that into the workbook. So we've actually got a book and workbook combo out for partners of sex addicts.
Okay, and again, the name of that book is, and the workbook.
In the workbook, it was not only the book itself and the information. We have a chapter in there on disclosure. It's called The Disclosure Dilemma. But I also emphasized the theme of spiritual abuse in there because we were working with a lot of partners who experienced that as well. So there's a chapter in the book that really places an emphasis on that. And, of course, there's a lot on the trauma that you go through and some solutions, some healing techniques that we often use with partners. And it's one of those things we're learning so much that it's very hard. Whenever you write something, there's a good chance that by the time it rolls off the printing press, it's going to be outdated. And this book was one that in less than a year we were already working on a revision. And so this version of it, Spouses of Sex Addicts Hope for the Journey, actually has about 25% more information than the original had.
Wow. And then how can they get that workbook?
The book and the workbook are both available through Barnes & Noble or through Amazon. And I believe those are the two main sources of it right now. I would tell you order it from me, but we've sold out of the last one we had printed. But you can still readily get it from Amazon or Barnes & Noble.
You know, I'm so glad you brought up the terms codependency and co-addict, because clearly we as clinicians, many of us, have done our best to educate both the community and other therapists about why they should never refer to a partner as a co-addict. Can you explain to our listening audience why that is such a disservice and an injustice to a partner of a sex addict?
There are so many underlying assumptions that go with the idea of calling a partner a co-addict that, you know, when you start to look at what it means, it's devastating, it's very destructive, and it is so inaccurate. It just simply does not line up with any research that's out there. It does not line up with good clinical practice. And the model itself is very destructive, and sadly, it's a model that's still very prevalent out there today. Now, what has happened, of course, is a lot of people have changed the language, but they haven't really changed the model, and so in some ways that's made it worse. But I'll never forget the first time I sat down with a partner of a sex addict, and she came in, sat down, and the first words out of her mouth as she shook her finger at me were, "Don't you dare call me a co-addict." Well, I wasn't planning to, but at first I was kind of confused by it. This was a long time ago when that was the model we were still working from, because I was just taught that a co-addict was someone who's in a relationship with an addict, and that sounded pretty benign. But when you start to realize the implications of it, and that in essence you're blaming it's a term that's used to blame the partner for the addict's struggles or to make them responsible for the addict's recovery. It basically is one that says the partner has their own disease, and that if they happen to struggle with anxiety or, God forbid, they ever happen to check a credit card bill or something, that would then get labeled as their form of acting out. And then the partner ends up getting shamed for simply checking out a normal gut reaction. And so it did a lot of damage to people and still does whenever it's used. And I'll never forget the very first spouses workshop I ever participated in. And one of the workshop leaders, this is probably 15 years ago, got up on the second day of the workshop and told everyone in the group, and I quote, "You're all sicker than your husbands."
Oh, my gosh.
And it was like, no wonder these folks don't want to come to group or come to therapy if they're going to be treated that way. They were being blamed, in essence, and were being told that, you know, they needed to go work their own 12-step program, that they had their own disease, and they were just being devastated by some of this stuff that's out there. And, you know, finally, you know, Barbara Steffens and was another lady, I've forgotten her name right now, they published their research that showed that 70% of the partners upon discovery have all but one symptom of post-traumatic stress disorder. And I know Barbara's been on this show and has talked with you about that, but that right there should have been enough to make clinicians wake up and stop using terms like co-addict and using concepts like co-addict, and to begin to reframe their work and to begin practicing with models that were more research-based and were more compassionate and more client-friendly. So, there's a lot of damage that has been done with the term co-addict, largely just because of all the underlying implications. And partners really resent it when you put that kind of a label on them.
Well, absolutely. As if they haven't gone through enough betrayal with their individual spouses, then they get into therapy with somebody and they go through treatment betrayal. When they're pathologized for the addict's issues, and feel like they are in some way responsible for that, it makes them feel crazy. And, for a lot of our listeners who are partners of sex addicts, they know what the term gaslighting means. And gaslighting is that terminology, for anybody who doesn't know, that, you're talking with your addict spouse, and he or she is making you feel crazy. He's saying, I wasn't looking at my phone, or, we didn't get that phone call, or I was only gone 10 minutes, or your intuition is crazy. And that gaslighting experience makes a person feel like they can't trust their own intuition. And so it's really interesting, because if a therapist is doing the same thing, clearly that woman that walked into your office and said, I am not a co-addict, so don't even think you're going to call me that, she was assertive, she knew how she felt, and she was setting a boundary with you, even though she didn't need to let you know right off the bat she wasn't going to accept that kind of stigmatization and disrespect.
Yeah, as I look back on that experience, it certainly taught me a lot, and it was really a strong, healthy thing that she was willing to come in there and do. And, that's one of the things that today partners are certainly getting themselves educated, and they're demanding a better standard of care, and I'm very proud of them for that. And, APSATS is the result of a grassroots movement that really is that came from partners demanding better care. And, I think we're seeing
really
a lot of
proud
great
of
things.
them, and you and I are both on their board. We were working hard to make sure that we're addressing the issues of partners. And, we won't go into it today. There may be another show we can talk about some of the professionals that don't even believe in sexual addiction and are disputing that, and that, of course, then disputes the reality of so many addicts and their partners. But, Richard, I just want to tell you, I so appreciate the work you've done. You were one of the pioneers for partners and for pastoral counseling for sex addicts, and it's not been an easy field to navigate. There's been a lot of clinicians that don't know what they think about this whole condition. So I just really appreciate the fact that you've made it your mission, and you've worked on it from every different angle.
Well, I appreciate your kind words. It's certainly true when you do hear things in the media, people trying to claim that this problem doesn't exist. Well, then the partners and the addicts, for that matter, go to try to get help, and they're discounted. In essence, it's like therapists gaslighting their clients, where they try to alter the client's reality. And, we know as clinicians what we see in our offices every day. We know the trauma that both addicts and partners experience. And when they go in to a clinician, or maybe if they're looking for spiritual assistance, they go to a member of the clergy, and they're minimized or they're ridiculed. It just makes things so much worse for them. And they begin to feel more hopeless. It's like, where can I possibly turn? Even the therapist won't believe me, or they're going to discount this or minimize it. And that in and of itself, we often call it treatment-induced trauma. And that's when an addict or a partner come to a therapist or a member of the clergy, and they're seeking help, and they end up being abused and re-traumatized instead.
Yeah, and again, you and I are both advocates for people that are for the partners and the addicts. We understand that each one of them has their own unique situation based on what has happened to them, the relational trauma. And, let's face it, for some of our addicts, there's a lot of relational trauma in their own backgrounds that have contributed to sexual addiction. So I want to have you back on again to talk more about this field and disclosures, and I just, again, really appreciate your work. I've sent you people that their lives have been changed by your work, and so thank you so much for contributing tonight, and I wish you the best of success and hope to talk with you real soon.
Well, thanks, Carol. It's been a joy to be here, and grateful for you and your work through this show.
Okay. Well, you take care, and we'll talk soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So that was Richard Blankenship, and he obviously has made his mission through Capstone Centers to provide real specialized service to addicts and their partners. And, it's people like Richard that have made a real difference in this world. So now I've got to say, I so appreciate you listening to the show. You know what I want you to do. I say it at the end of every show. Besides me telling you to fearlessly face your fears head on, I want you to go to my website and buy Sexual Addiction Wisdom from the Masters. You can buy the hardback, and I'll specifically autograph it and send it to you. Or you can go to Amazon or Barnes & Nobles and buy the ebook. It's $10. So it just depends on if you like a digital book or you want the hardback. But I've got to tell you, I've compiled it with some of the masters in the field, and every bit of the money that we raise goes to addiction research, specifically for sexual addiction. And so I said I was going to raise $50,000, and I need your help. Please, 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 for Christmas, buy this book for yourself or your partner. And as a matter of fact, I have a chapter from Barbara Steffens on partner relational trauma, and I have a chapter from Patrick Carnes, the guru and founder of sexual addiction. And there's one in there from me on defense mechanisms, and Ken Adams talking about enmeshment. And, I've just got some of the experts in the field that are going to give you some important information. So please buy that book, Sexual Addiction Wisdom from the Masters, compiled by me. Go to my website, sexhelpwithcarolthecoach.com, and get that book. Richard, if you're still listening, I want you to go out and buy that book too. I'm asking all the therapists I know, buy the book. Donate to research. And I'll see you next week. So I want you to fearlessly have the courage to be yourself, keep working on your recovery, and know that we are there for you. You're listening to Sex Help with Carol the Coach, and you have a great week. Talk to you next Monday, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.